Hello and welcome to Must Read Fiction, a place for people who know that life is better with a novel in hand. I'm Erin Popelka, and I am so pleased to be here today with author Gina Fattore. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. Greetings from Los Angeles.
Well, thank you so very much for being here. Greetings from Spokane, Washington. A little bit about Gina Fattore. She is a moderately successful TV writer whose credits include Dare Me, Better Things, Unreal, Masters of Sex, Parenthood, Californication, Gilmore Girls, and Dawson's Creek. In 2015, she delivered a TED Talk called Become What You Believe at TEDx Grand Rapids. And it is a fantastic TED Talk. Everyone go watch it. Her essays, reviews, and comedy pieces have appeared in the Chicago Reader, Salon, The Millions, and McSweeney's Internet Tendency. Her debut novel is The Spinster Diaries, and I know you have a copy of that with you. Please show us this beautiful book. Yay! Welcome to the world of The Spinster Diaries. Please tell me about it. Tell me about the book.
So The Spinster Diaries is really a tale of two spinsters. One is a television writer like myself, living in Los Angeles back in the year 2006, if you cast your mind back that far. And the other one is the 18th century novelist and diarist, Frances Burney, who is relatively unknown, but was one of Jane Austen's great inspirations. There were a lot more female novelists writing at the end of the 18th century than people really realize. And Frances Burney is one who I first discovered when I was in college, and I was an English major at Columbia. And her life has just always been a source of inspiration to me. So I started off in a funny way writing about myself, but I ended up writing about her. I just couldn't stop myself. I think she's such a fascinating and inspirational figure.
Oh, fantastic. So great. And what an interesting kind of like juxtaposition of the 2006, and then going way back and, kind of women having their day and kind of both of those moments. So that's super interesting.
Exactly. That was, the motivation for, even the title, The Spinster Diaries, spinster wasn't necessarily as bad of a word in the late 18th century. It was more straight up descriptive of just a woman who did not marry. And don't get me wrong, it did have negative connotations. It was considered, that you were past the age at which you were likely to marry, which of course, as we all know from reading Jane Austen novels, was maybe like 24. Like it was
Sure.
just like, it was, by the time you're Anne Elliot in Persuasion and you're 29, everyone is extremely worried about you. Or wait, maybe she's actually only 27. I gotta refresh my memory.
Indeed. Either way, like almost like hard to wrap your brain around that would be like so old as to be like written off. Yes, indeed.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah, it was a different time, but especially like I said, it was a time when women, there were female writers that Jane Austen herself could read and look up to, and Frances Burney was one of them. Her first novel was published when she was 26 years old, and it was published anonymously, and all of London was sort of scrambling to find out who'd written this book. It was called Evelina, and it was really the story of a young woman trying to find her way in the world. And it did end with marriage, as most novels and stories about women for hundreds of years traditionally have ended.
Mm-hmm. Fascinating. And that actually like leads into my next question. So this book has been described as an unromantic comedy. And I wonder if you could just tell me a little bit more why an unromantic comedy?
Well, I think, as you said and mentioned in my bio, I am a television writer myself. And so I have worked on a lot of shows that actually tell romantic stories. And, I think romantic comedy in particular always ends in marriage. If you go back to Shakespeare, if you go to Jane Austen, just as a form of entertainment and as a genre, that's how those stories always end. And so I think that the narrator of the book is especially, kind of cynical and hardened and not particularly romantic. So I think that was where the description came from. But, these two things coming together romance and comedy. It's always been an obsession of mine. Not just with Jane Austen, but also the screwball comedies of the 1930s and 40s. I love all those movies, which, were a clear and present influence on Gilmore Girls, which I was lucky enough to work on in its very, very last year. So just those stories of, the conventions of them are very much etched in place, with bickering lovers and all of those steps along the way, leading to a kiss at the end and a happy ending. So I like to try to play with the formula a little bit.
Yes, so good. And thank you for doing that, because I feel like certainly with both television and with our novels, you're right, there is this formula. I mean, it's a children's rhyme, like first comes love, then comes May. It's just like, and it's easy to forget that that's just a story, right? Like it's just a narrative that we all swallow, but maybe not all of us. So thank you for showing that we don't all have to swallow that really standard narrative. That's fantastic. So also, the book is described as being semi-autobiographical. And so I wondered if you could speak a little bit. It is a novel, so it is fiction. So this is not your life, but maybe there's some interesting details that might be sort of the same. So how did you walk that balance between being like fiction and being semi-autobiographical?
Well, this is the part that where I have to admit that like I am just very, very lazy. So I know like a lot of your more fancy novelists will try to say like I made this stuff up, but actually a lot of this is just my real life. I mean, the opening action of the book is really this moment from 2006 when I found out I had a little medical crisis. But the reason that makes it a comedy is that it wasn't actually life-threatening. It was like, as someone said to me at the time, it was kind of like I won the lottery of brain tumors. So I found out in January of 2006 that I had essentially a benign tumor called a meningioma, but it's a kind of brain tumor that's on the outer coating of your brain. So the bigger that they get, they can actually affect, any part of your brain. Like if it's in the back, it'll affect your walking and motion and all that. Mine happened to be right here, directly between my eyes. So it was a kind of a funny thing because it was a crisis, but it was essentially something that like, it's not cancer. It's not that kind of a crisis. You just, the only treatment for it really is to take it out, which means that you have to have brain surgery. And, I have to admit to being sort of skittish about having brain surgery.
Oh, so, yeah. Oh, for sure.
So the book is sort of, the story of that time in my life when I was trying to make that decision. What should I do about my brain tumor? And but it's kind of just a year in the life of the character based on me, who's a television writer with this sort of anxiety producing medical problem. But it always stays on the comic side of everything because again, this was, in the relative scheme of things, we're living through a moment right now where that's important to remember that like, if you have your health, you have everything. And, we got to save our resources for the people who are in real distress.
Yes, absolutely. And thank you for saying that. We are definitely in a pretty interesting moment. April 2020, we are kind of in the midst of sheltering in place and staying isolated, but I'm so glad we can connect over Zoom. This is a very safe way to have a good conversation. And I did wash my hands before this call, so we're good. Yes, indeed. And so tell me too, so like a lot of this you said is based on, your winning the lottery of brain tumors, but again, brain tumor, like very, very scary. And so how did fiction give you a little bit more to play with there? Like, because you knew you were basing it on your real life, but you knew it wasn't you. Like, what did that distance feel like?
I mean, I think the big thing I've learned from being a TV writer, essentially a screenwriter, a person who writes for the screen, is voice. And, when a character speaks, that tells you everything about them. And especially, I mean, again, Gilmore Girls is a good example, right? Of how the characters speak is so central to how the story is told. So my book is a first person story, and the narrator is essentially an unreliable narrator. She doesn't always see situations clearly, but what I was doing was I was just pushing the comedy of the reality. So I started with the reality, and just kept pushing the voice and, really genuinely trying to make it funny, which is, my career started when I was an assistant on the show King of the Hill. So the first thing I ever wrote was an episode of King of the Hill. And I really have always, I don't know, comedy to me is so vital and necessary. And I've worked on a lot of shows that are kind of walking the line between comedy and drama, but more so maybe in my TV writing career, more drama. The show I'm doing right now, Dare Me, straight up drama. And so really, for myself, I've always wanted to write comedy. And so I just kept pushing the reality of the situation in the direction of the funny.
Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. And I know for me too, in this moment that we're in, I am finding myself drawn to all lightness, all fluff. Like I do not need some big tome that is heavy right now. Like I just need something to just distract me and immerse me. So thank you.
It's 212 pages. It's kind of zooms along. So that was also the goal. Yeah.
Fantastic. So great. So the book is called The Spinster Diaries. And in your TED Talk that we mentioned before called Become What You Believe, you talk about I quote you, you say you wanted to grow up to become a spinster. So tell me a little bit more about, that's, an unusual thing for someone to want to grow up to be. So tell me a little bit more about that for you.
I think it's funny. I always like to joke. So I grew up in Indiana in essentially the 70s. And sometimes I like to joke that the 70s in Indiana were actually the 50s. And so I feel like, growing up, I really did live in a world where women were moms, which is amazing. And they were nurses, which is even more amazing. And they were teachers. And so, I had my role models were teachers, and I think we had a female doctor in my town, but I really feel like, there weren't a wide variety of, options and choices that you could sort of look at. And I've loved books and I've loved writing. Like, I really feel like since I was, 8 or 9 years old, like I wrote my first book when I was in the 5th grade. And got to attend the Young Authors Conference in my hometown.
Congratulations!
Yes, I'm sure I still have that certificate somewhere, but that. And then I got to go again in 6th grade, and so writing, I just always felt like I had this calling, and it is sort of unusual. But I guess when I looked around and I looked at what marriage was. Again, I'm a really, really lazy person, and it just all looked like so much work. Have you seen what these moms are doing? Like, this is like work. Like, it's just like insane levels of work. And I just think that there's a part of me that was like, wow, like, I don't know that I can do that. I am living in my head, and I'm thinking all the time, and I just don't know that I'm cut out for it. I have the utmost respect for people, especially right now, who are working and homeschooling little children and teaching them to, know their algebra and, tenses and things like that. So yeah,
yes.
It's really from a position of like sheer laziness. I was like, I don't know if I can do all this thing about having it all. Like, no, I don't think I can do that.
Yes. And it definitely makes sense. Like I too do not have children. And so it opens up a lot of time. And in many ways too, like I think like books get this metaphor of almost like being like our babies, right? But there's a lot to it, right? It takes a long time for them to develop it. Like it takes a long time for them to come into the world. And then when they're in the world, you kind of have to let them go. And then there's that process of being like an empty nester with your book. And so, I know that like that is a very heavy-handed metaphor. Mothers out there, I apologize. But a lot of it feels like really parallel. And so has that felt like with your book as it's been coming out, has that felt like something for that too for you?
I love what you said about you have to let go. That is so true. And it's just going to be what it is. Like it meant something different to me when I wrote it. And now people are reading it. Like, I've already had like my wonderful, wonderful, high school friends like buying it and putting up pictures on Facebook. And I think it finally dawned on me, other people are going to see it, and it's going to mean something different to them. I always joke with my TV writing. sometimes I would say in the beginning, I would say, I'm writing the first draft for me, for free even, and what they're paying me for is the subsequent 8 drafts that I have to write to like make it into the thing that is right for the show. And so I'm used to letting go. I also do have a lot of experience with that, which is like, you do your best and you let it go. And there were many points along the way where I thought it would never be published, and it really would just be for me because I was trying to do something that was different from my TV work and not as plot driven. And so all the major publishers did reject it, and my press, Prospect Park Books, took a chance on me. So I'm so grateful.
Excellent. And we are so grateful. Thank you. Thank you for writing it. Thank you to Prospect Park Books for bringing it out into the world. Yeah, thank you. And must readers, please do check out the Spinster Diaries. So, so, so exciting. For my last question, though, I would be remiss if I didn't talk a little bit about your TV writing, because so many of us only get to experience television as a viewer and as an audience member. And I'm so curious, like, tell me a little bit about behind the curtain. Like, are there things back there that like have surprised you, or is there anything that you wish like all viewers would know about it's like what it's like to work in that world?
Okay, these are very good questions. I will start by saying the one thing I would like viewers to know is that the actors do not actually make up the dialogue themselves. So we're all a little touchy about that as writers. Like everyone, there is improvisation that occurs on the sets, and sometimes people can't remember their lines, and that's okay because everybody's human. But we are actually writing this stuff is the first thing I would point out. But I would say in general, TV writing is just not understood at all by people in the wider world. I didn't understand it until I started working in it. And in a funny way, because the book is a year in the life of a writer working on a network television show, it does sort of show what it's like to work in TV, at least to work on a network show. Now things have changed. We have so many more shows. We have all these cable shows, but there's nothing more collaborative than working on a TV show. So I do sometimes joke that I am, a classic introvert who got into writing age 10 because I thought it was something you could do alone. And then I found my way to Los Angeles and realized I could make a living as a TV writer, but it is all day, every day with other people. You are just on, like, and if you're lucky enough to be, when you're writing and you're in the room, you're with the other writers bouncing ideas off of each other, and you're all trying to contribute to creating something that's in the style and the voice that was established by the creator of the show with the pilot episode. So there's really a craft to TV writing that's actually about duplicating and replicating something that's in someone else's voice. And there's also a lot of producing to it, which is what makes TV different than movies, that within TV, writers are also producers of their own work, not always, but frequently. And so they have more power to control who they're casting in the parts, and how they're spending their money, and which things are most important to them. So TV, I can't say enough. I'm a fan of it. I've been a fan of it since I was, staying up till the 10 o'clock news to watch every show in elementary school. And I think that it's hard to do it well, but when every single department is working together and to just like realize the same vision, it's so amazing. And my show Dare Me, I'm so proud of it. I'll do a little plug for that. But I always like to joke, Dawson's Creek was my film school. I believe that is streaming on Hulu, and I obviously Gilmore Girls which I had very little to do with. I only worked on that last season that everyone hates. But it's brought joy to so many people on Netflix. And so yeah, when it's going well, it's incredibly fun. And sometimes it's just a lot of hard work. It's a lot of hard nights on the sets for the actors, and a lot of deadlines for the writers that you just can't miss. You
Yes.
gotta deliver.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, thank you. Thank you for that snapshot of a little bit of like what happens behind the television shows that we all know and love. And thank you. That's a little teaser almost because it sounds like we can get lots more of it by reading the Spinster Diaries. So,
Exactly.
yes.
Exactly.
Yes, indeed. So, do show us that beautiful book one more time, The Spinster Diaries. Gina Fattore, thank you so very much for writing that fantastic book. And thank you for taking the time to speak with me today.
Oh, it was so fun. Thank you. And stay well out there in Washington.
And you as well down there in Los Angeles. Thank you.